Sometimes grief doesn't kill you all at once. It just makes you want to disappear. After losing his wife, 55-year-old Anders Voss moved into his grandfather's abandoned house deep in a bamboo forest, hoping to spend his remaining years alone. He went there to fix broken boards and forget. But the house had secrets. Hidden beneath the floorboards were old love letters. Behind a sealed attic door was a family truth buried for 60 years. The more Anders uncovered, the more he realized his grandfather hadn't just left this place. He had fled from something. And whatever that was, it changed everything Anders thought he knew about his family. What he found didn't just explain the past. It gave him a reason to fight for his future. Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The dirt road ended where the bamboo began. Anders Voss sat in his truck for a long moment, engine ticking as it cooled, staring at the house he hadn't seen in 40 years. His grandfather's house. His house now, technically, though it looked more like a relic than a home. Beside him, Coda whined softly. The German Shepherd mix had been Sylvia's dog originally, but in the 2 years since her death, he'd become Anders' constant companion. The only one who didn't ask how he was doing, or suggest he'd try to move on. "I know, boy," Anders said, scratching behind Coda's ears. "Looks rough." Rough was generous. The house sagged in the middle like a broken back. Vines claimed the porch railings. Windows stared blankly through years of grime and spiderwebs. The bamboo forest had encroached to within 20 feet of the structure. Green stalks, thick as a man's wrist, pressing close like curious neighbors. But it was isolated, silent, exactly what Anders needed. He climbed out of the truck, his knees protesting. 55 wasn't old, but grief had aged him. He caught his reflection in the side mirror sometimes and saw his father looking back. The same deep-set eyes, the same lines carved by worry rather than laughter. Coda bounded out after him, immediately investigating the perimeter with his nose to the ground. Anders pulled his duffel from the truck bed, then the cooler with 3 days' worth of food, then the toolbox that had been his father's and his grandfather's before that. The weight of it felt right in his hand, familiar. The porch steps groaned under his weight, but held. The door was locked, though the key his father's estate lawyer had given him looked too new, too bright. Someone had changed the locks at some point, probably when the property passed through probate decades ago. Inside, the air was thick with dust and abandonment. Anders propped the door open, letting afternoon light slice through the gloom. The main room was larger than he remembered, or maybe he'd just been smaller the last time he visited as a boy. His grandfather Otto had already been gone by then, left in 1962 when Anders' father was just 17. The family never spoke of why he left, just that he did, and that was that. Furniture sat draped in stained sheets like sleeping ghosts. The floorboards were warped in places, buckled from water damage. The stone fireplace looked sound, though birds had nested in the chimney. Anders could work with this. He'd built his career as a carpenter, had owned a successful custom furniture business in the city until Sylvia got sick. After she died, he'd sold everything. Couldn't bear to create beauty when his world had gone grey. But fixing things, that was different. Fixing required no inspiration, just methodical work. Replace the broken with the whole. Cover the damage with the new. Maybe if he fixed enough of the house, something inside him would repair too. He spent the first hour making the place habitable, swept the main room and kitchen, found the well pump still worked, though the water ran brown for 5 minutes before clearing. The electricity had been shut off years ago, but he'd brought a generator and camp lanterns. He didn't need much. Coda found a sunny spot on the porch and settled in, content to watch the bamboo sway. Anders walked through the house room by room, cataloguing damage. The kitchen needed a new sink and half the cabinet doors. The bathroom was a disaster. Cracked toilet, mildewed shower, floor so soft he could feel it give. 2 bedrooms upstairs, both with roof leaks and ruined plaster. The master bedroom downstairs had a door that wouldn't close and floorboards that buckled ominously underfoot. But the bones were good. The frame was solid old-growth timber. The foundation was fieldstone 2 feet thick. His grandfather had built this place to last, even if he hadn't stayed to enjoy it. As evening approached, Anders sat on the porch with a cold beer from the cooler and a sandwich that tasted like cardboard. Everything tasted like cardboard now. Sylvia had been the cook, the one who made meals into occasions. Without her, food was just fuel. He pulled her journal from his jacket pocket, worn brown leather, pages softened by her touch. She'd kept it through her illness, writing less and less as the cancer spread. He'd found it on her bedside table the day she died, and he'd carried it everywhere since. But he'd never opened it. Couldn't bear to see her handwriting, to hear her voice in his head when he could no longer hear it in the world. The bamboo rustled in the wind, a sound like rain on water. In the fading light, the forest felt alive, watching. Anders imagined his grandfather standing here 60 years ago, looking at these same stalks, making the decision to leave. What drove a man to abandon everything? Otto had a wife, a son, a trade, and he'd walked away from all of it. The family story was that he'd gone west looking for work, died somewhere in Nevada in the 70s alone. But there were gaps in that story, spaces where the truth should have been. Anders' father had never spoken of Otto without bitterness in his voice. A man who leaves is a man who fails. That was the family creed. And now here Anders was, having left his own children. Not physically maybe, but in every way that mattered. After Sylvia's funeral, he'd stopped answering their calls, stopped showing up for Sunday dinners, stopped pretending he knew how to be a father when he could barely remember how to be human. Freya, his daughter, had tried the longest. Showed up at his apartment with groceries, with invitations, with tears. He'd sent her away every time, told her he was fine, needed space. The hurt in her eyes had been unbearable, but not as unbearable as the thought of sitting across from his children and making small talk when his wife's chair sat empty. Kieran, his son, had stopped trying after 6 months. Just stopped calling. Anders couldn't blame him. Now here he was, running just like Otto had. The realization sat heavy in his chest. Goda came over and rested his chin on Anders' knee, brown eyes full of uncomplicated devotion. Anders stroked the dog's head, grateful for this one creature who didn't need him to be anything other than present. "Just you and me now, boy," he said. "We'll fix this place up, keep our hands busy." That's enough. But even as he said it, he felt the house around him full of silence and secrets. Whatever drove Otto away had happened here, in these rooms, under this roof. And now Anders was sleeping where ghosts slept. He drained his beer and stood, muscles stiff from the long drive. Time to set up his sleeping bag, get the lanterns positioned, settle in for the first night. Tomorrow, he'd start the real work. The endless, methodical work of restoration that would fill his days and maybe, if he was lucky, empty his mind of everything that hurt. As he walked inside, he glanced back at the bamboo forest. In the twilight, it looked like a wall of shadows, dense and impenetrable. Beyond it somewhere was the world he'd left behind. His children, his former life. The grave, where Sylvia lay beneath a headstone that read, "Beloved wife and mother." He closed the door on all of it and turned to face the dim interior of his grandfather's house. His house, his hermitage, his last chance to figure out how to live with the weight of loss without being crushed by it. The floorboards creaked under his feet. Somewhere in the walls, something skittered. Mice, probably, or rats. The house settling, making the sounds old houses make. Or maybe it was just the past, restless and unquiet, waiting to be discovered. The first week passed in a blur of physical labor. Anders attacked the house with something close to fury, ripping out rotted wood, hauling debris, scrubbing decades of grime from surfaces that hadn't seen daylight in years. His hands blistered, then calloused. His back ached. He fell asleep each night, too exhausted to dream. It was exactly what he needed. By day 8, he'd worked his way to the master bedroom. The buckled floorboards couldn't be ignored any longer. Someone could fall through if the rot went deep enough. He started in the corner by the window, prying up boards to assess the joists beneath. The third board came up with a splintering crack, and something fell into the space below. Anders peered into the gap. The morning light caught the edge of something that wasn't wood or insulation. He reached down carefully, mindful of nails and splinters, and pulled out a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. His heart kicked unexpectedly. The oilcloth was brittle with age, but had protected its contents from moisture. He sat back on his heels and carefully unwrapped it. Letters, a stack of them tied with a faded blue ribbon. Beneath them, 3 photographs and a silver locket on a tarnished chain. Anders' hands trembled slightly as he lifted the first letter. The envelope was addressed to Otto Voss in feminine handwriting. No return address, but the postmark read Pinewood, 1960. He slid the letter out, thin paper, careful script. "My dearest Otto," it began. "3 days since I saw you, and already the hours feel like weeks. Lars left for the city this morning. I have the house to myself until Sunday. Can you come tomorrow? I need to feel your arms around me, to remember that this is real, that we are real, even when the world says we shouldn't be." Anders read it twice, the words not quite landing. Otto, his grandfather, having an affair? Otto, who'd been married to Helene, Anders' grandmother. He picked up another letter, this one dated 1961. The handwriting was the same, but the tone had shifted. "Otto, I can't keep doing this. Meeting in secret, lying to everyone I know. Lars is suspicious. Yesterday he asked why I smile so much when I'm supposed to be at the market." I had no answer. "But when I think of ending this, of never seeing you again, I can't breathe. What are we going to do?" Anders spread the letters out on the floor, arranging them by date. There were 23 in total, spanning from 1958 to 1962. He read them in order, watching a love story unspool. Otto and a woman named Astrid Bergman, meeting in secret, falling impossibly in love despite Otto's marriage and Astrid's own. The early letters were full of joy and longing. The later ones grew desperate. In the letter from October 1960, Astrid wrote, "I have news that changes everything. I'm carrying your child, Otto. I'm certain of it. Lars hasn't touched me in months. He'll know immediately it isn't his. What do we do? I'm terrified and overjoyed all at once." Anders sat back against the wall, the letter slack in his hands. His grandfather had gotten another woman pregnant. That meant somewhere out there, possibly, was family he'd never known about. He picked up the photographs. The first showed a young woman, dark-haired, delicate features, eyes that looked both sad and defiant. The second was Otto, younger than Anders had ever seen him, standing beside what looked like this very house. The third photograph stopped Anders cold. 3 people, Otto, the woman who must be Astrid, and another man. They stood together at what looked like a village festival, bunting visible in the background. Someone had written on the back in faded ink, "The 3 of us before everything changed." Summer 1960. The other man had his arm around Astrid's shoulders in a way that spoke of ownership more than affection. Lars, probably. Astrid's husband. The last letter in the stack was dated November 1962, written in a rushed, almost illegible hand. "Otto, Lars knows about the baby. He came to the house tonight in a rage. He said terrible things, made threats against both of us, against the child. You have to stay away. If he sees you here, I don't know what he'll do. Please, my love, just stay away until his anger cools. I'll find a way to reach you when it's safe. Keep yourself safe. Keep our love safe. I'll wait forever if I have to." That was the last one. No resolution, no ending. Just Astrid begging Otto to stay away and then silence. Anders checked the dates again. Otto had left the house in December 1962, according to family law. 1 month after this letter, he picked up the silver locket, worked the catch open with his thumbnail. Inside were 2 tiny photographs. One was Otto, young and serious. The other was a baby, newborn, swaddled in white. Anders sat in the dusty bedroom, surrounded by evidence of his grandfather's secret life, and felt something shift inside him. For 2 years he'd been numb, going through motions, existing but not living. Now, holding these letters, he felt curiosity stir. Questions crowded his mind. Who was Astrid Bergman? What happened to her? What happened to the child? Did Anders' father know about any of this? Did anyone? And why had these letters been hidden here, in the floorboards of the bedroom? Had Otto hidden them or Astrid? He stood, legs stiff from sitting on the hard floor, and walked to the window. The bamboo forest swayed beyond the glass, indifferent to human drama. Somewhere out there was the village of Pinewood, where these people had lived and loved and made choices that rippled forward through time. Anders pulled his phone from his pocket and looked at the screen. 2 missed calls from Freya. She called every few days now, leaving messages he never returned. "Dad, please just let me know you're okay. That's all I need. Just a text. Just something." He thought about calling her now, telling her what he'd found. But what would he say? "Your great-grandfather had a secret affair, and possibly a secret child. And I found love letters in the floor." It sounded insane. Besides, he didn't know enough yet. The story was incomplete, full of gaps and questions. He looked down at the letters scattered on the floor, at the photographs of people long dead or disappeared, at evidence of love and secrets and choices that tore families apart. For the first time since Sylvia died, Anders felt something other than grief. He felt purpose, curiosity, a need to understand what had happened here in this house 60 years ago. He gathered the letters carefully, retied the ribbon, wrapped them back in the oilcloth. He'd keep looking, keep searching the house. There had to be more letters, more clues, something that would tell him how this story ended. That night, Anders sat on the porch with Coda at his feet and Sylvia's journal in his hands. He opened it for the first time, his heart hammering against his ribs. The last entry was dated 3 days before she died. Her handwriting was shaky, some letters trailing off where she'd lost strength. "Anders, my love," it read. "I know you're reading this after I'm gone. I know you, and I know you'll carry this with you, unable to let go. So I'm writing this to tell you, let go. Promise me you won't disappear into grief. Promise me you'll live, really live, not just exist. Our children need you. The world needs you. I need you to be okay, even when I'm not here to see it. Promise me you'll live." Anders closed the journal, his vision blurred. He'd been breaking that promise every day for 2 years. But now, with his grandfather's secrets spread before him, and questions burning in his mind, he felt the faintest stirring of life returning. Maybe understanding Otto's story could help him understand his own. Maybe finding out what happened to Astrid and the child could teach him something about love and loss and the choices we make when caught between impossible options. He looked out at the bamboo forest, dark now under a moonless sky, and made a decision. He would find the truth. He would uncover his grandfather's story, piece by piece, until he understood why Otto left and what happened to the people he loved. And maybe in the process, he'd find his way back to life, back to his children, back to keeping the promise he'd made to Sylvia without even knowing it. The house creaked around him, no longer just a structure to repair, but a puzzle to solve, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Anders felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years, anticipation for tomorrow. Anders became a man possessed. The house restoration continued, but now every board he pried up, every drawer he opened, every corner he cleared was part of a larger investigation. He was searching for pieces of a story that had been deliberately hidden. In the second bedroom upstairs, he found a woman's hairpin wedged between the floorboards, delicate silver with small blue stones. In the kitchen, behind a loose panel under the sink, he discovered sheet music for a song called Autumn Leaves, with the name Astrid written in pencil at the top. In the closet of the master bedroom, pushed far back on the highest shelf, a child's wooden toy, a small horse, hand-carved, the kind of thing a craftsman might make for a son. Each discovery felt like a breadcrumb, proof that Astrid had lived here, that she and Otto had shared this space. Anders cleared the dining room table and laid everything out like evidence at a crime scene. He created a timeline on a long sheet of butcher paper, marking dates from the letters, filling in what he knew. Otto married to Helene. Astrid married to Lars Hoffmann. The affair beginning in 1958, the pregnancy in 1960, Otto's departure in December 1962. But there were gaps, huge glaring gaps. What happened to Lars? What happened to Astrid? What happened to the child? He found the third photograph again. Otto, Astrid and Lars together at the festival. The 3 of them looked almost friendly, standing close. Lars's arm around Astrid in a possessive way, but Otto smiling too. Had Lars known about the affair when this photo was taken? Or was this before everything fell apart? The inscription haunted him. The three of us before everything changed. Anders pulled out his laptop and tried searching online. Astrid Bergman Pinewood yielded nothing useful. Lars Hoffman Pinewood gave him a few genealogy website hits, but nothing he could access without paying for a membership. He tried searching for death records, birth records, marriage records, but the internet only went back so far, and small-town records from the 1960s weren't all digitized. He needed to go to Pinewood, talk to people who might remember, check physical records at the village hall or county office. The thought of leaving the house, of engaging with the outside world, made his chest tight. He'd come here to hide, to be alone. But the mystery was bigger than his desire for isolation. His phone rang. Freya again. This time he answered, "Dad?" Her voice was startled, as if she hadn't expected him to pick up. "Hey, sweetheart." Silence on the other end, then, "Are you okay?" "Where are you?" "I'm at Grandpa Otto's place." "The old house in the forest." "But why?" Anders looked around at the half-restored rooms, at his timeline spread across the table, at the evidence of his grandfather's secret life. "I needed to get away. Clear my head. Thought I'd fix the place up. Dad, you've been gone 3 weeks. You didn't tell anyone where you were going. Kieran and I have been worried sick. 3 weeks? Had it been that long?" Time had compressed into cycles of work and discovery, days blurring together. "I'm sorry. I should have called." "Yes, you should have." Her voice cracked. "We thought we didn't know if you were safe." Guilt settled heavy on his shoulders. "I'm safe. I'm good, actually. Better than I've been in a while." "Really? Really?" "I found something here, Freya. Something about Grandpa Otto, about the family." He hesitated, then added, "Your grandmother Helene. Did she ever mention another woman? Someone named Astrid?" "What? No, why?" "Anders made a decision. Can I tell you about it later? I need to understand more first, but I might need your help with something. You're good with computers, right? Better than me." "Dad, what's going on?" "Just trust me. I'll explain everything soon. But I need to know, did Grandma Helene leave any papers? Any old letters or documents?" Freya was quiet for a moment. "Actually, yes. When we cleaned out your storage unit last year, Kieran and I found a box of Grandma's things. Old photos, some letters, documents. We were going to ask you what to do with them, but you weren't. You weren't really talking to us then. Do you still have them?" "They're at my apartment. Could you send them to me? Overnight, if possible?" "Dad, you're scaring me a little." "Don't be scared. I'm working something out. Something important." "Please, Freya," she sighed. "Okay, I'll send them. But I want you to call me again. Tomorrow. Promise me." "I promise." After they hung up, Anders sat holding the phone, feeling the first real connection to his daughter he'd felt in 2 years. He'd pushed her away so thoroughly, built such high walls, and yet here she was, ready to help the moment he asked. He'd been so focused on his own grief that he'd forgotten his children were grieving too. They'd lost their mother, and then they'd lost their father to sorrow and isolation. That evening, Anders drove the 15 miles to Pinewood. The village was smaller than he expected. A cluster of old buildings, a gas station, a tiny library, and a village hall that looked like it predated the Second World War. Most of the businesses on Main Street had closed, windows papered over. The kind of place young people left and rarely came back to. The village hall was still open, a light burning in the window. Anders parked and went inside. An elderly woman sat behind a desk, reading a paperback with large print. She looked up when he entered, eyes sharp behind thick glasses. "I help you?" "I hope so. I'm looking for some information about families who lived here in the 1960s. She set down her book. "Or doing genealogy research?" "Something like that. My grandfather lived near here. Otto Voss. I'm trying to find out about some people he knew." The woman's expression shifted, something flickering across her face. Recognition, maybe, or wariness. Otto Voss. Now that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Anders felt his pulse quicken. "You knew him?" "I was just a girl, but yes, I remember the Voss family. Caused quite a stir when Otto left like he did." She stood slowly, arthritis making her movements careful. I'm Ingrid Sorensen. I'm the village clerk, among other things. What exactly are you looking for? Information about a woman named Astrid Bergman. She would have been married to someone named Lars Hoffman. Ingrid's eyebrows rose. You're digging into old history, aren't you? Is there a registry? Birth and death records from that time? She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Follow me. She led him to a back room lined with filing cabinets and old ledgers. From one shelf, she pulled down a large, leather-bound book. Village Registry, 1950 to 1970. We keep the originals here, though some of it's been digitized now. She opened the book on a reading table, pages yellowed and fragile. Anders leaned over as she flipped through, searching. Here, she said, pointing to an entry. Astrid Bergman, born 1938, married to Lars Hoffman, 1956. Anders scanned the entry, heart pounding. Is there anything about children? Ingrid turned pages, found the birth registry. Johann Hoffman, born February 1961. Mother, Astrid Hoffman, formerly Bergman. Father, Lars Hoffman, February 1961. The timing matched the letters. Astrid had told Otto she was pregnant in late 1960. What about Lars Hoffman? Is there a death record? Ingrid flipped further. Her finger stopped on a line. Here, Lars Hoffman died December 1962, cause listed as accident. December 1962, the same month Otto left. What kind of accident? Doesn't specify. But I remember the talk. There were rumors it wasn't entirely an accident. He was found at the bottom of a ravine. Some said he fell while drunk. Others said... She stopped herself. Said what? Ingrid closed the book. There was a lot of gossip in those days. The Voss house brought shame to the village. Your grandfather and Mrs. Hoffman, everyone knew, even if they didn't speak of it openly. And when Lars died so soon after Otto left, people wondered. Anders felt cold. Wondered what? Wondered if there was more to it than an accident. But nothing was ever proven, and Astrid... She paused. Astrid left the village in 1965, took the boy with her. No one knew where they went. The boy, Johann. Yes, he'd be in his 60s now if he's still alive. Anders thanked Ingrid and stepped outside into the cool evening air. His mind churned with new information, each piece adding to the mystery instead of solving it. Lars dead under suspicious circumstances. Astrid gone with a child that might have been Otto's. Otto fled and never came back. What had happened in those final months of 1962? What had driven Otto away? And where had Astrid gone? He drove back to the house as the sun set, painting the bamboo forest gold and amber. When he arrived, Coda greeted him with enthusiasm, and Anders sat on the porch steps, scratching the dog's ears, trying to make sense of it all. His phone buzzed. A text from Freya, package shipped. Should arrive tomorrow afternoon. Love you, Dad? Anders stared at those last 3 words. When was the last time he'd told his children he loved them? Before Sylvia died, certainly. Maybe at the funeral. Not since. He typed back, love you too, sweetheart. Thank you. It wasn't enough. It didn't make up for 2 years of silence and absence. But it was a start. That night, Anders added new information to his timeline. Lars's death. Astrid's disappearance. The child, Johann, who would be 64 now if he'd survived. Somewhere out there, Anders might have an uncle he'd never known about. Family hidden by secrets and shame. He looked at Otto's photograph, young, conflicted, a man caught between duty and desire. Anders had judged his grandfather his whole life, seen him as a failure, a man who abandoned his family. But now, reading the letters, seeing the evidence of impossible choices, he felt something different. He felt understanding and kinship. Both of them men who'd loved and lost, who'd made choices that hurt people, who'd run when staying became unbearable. Maybe finding out what happened to Otto's hidden family could teach Anders how to stop running from his own. The package from Freya arrived the next afternoon, delivered by a confused courier who'd clearly never driven this far into the forest before. Anders signed for it and carried the box inside, anticipation thrumming through him. Inside were 3 photo albums, a bundle of letters tied with string, and a manila folder containing various documents. Birth certificates, marriage license, property deeds. His grandmother, Helene's life, condensed into a cardboard box. Anders spread everything on the dining table and began systematically going through it. The photo albums showed a life he'd never really considered. Helene as a young bride, round-faced and serious. Helene with Anders' father as a baby. Helene at various ages, growing older, always alone in the photos. No Otto after the earliest ones. In the third album, he found something that made him stop. A photograph tucked loose between pages. Otto, Helene, and a young boy of about 3. But there was another child in the photo too, a baby in Helene's arms. Anders studied the image, confused. His father had been an only child. Who was this second child? He turned the photo over. Written in faded ink, family portrait 1968, Otto Jr. and our new son. Our new son. Not our baby, not a name, just new son. Anders' hands trembled as he set the photo down. He rifled through the documents until he found what he was looking for, an adoption certificate dated 1968. Johann Hoffmann, age 7, adopted by Helene Voss. Name changed to Johann Voss. The pieces clicked together with sudden, stunning clarity. Astrid's child, Otto's child, had been adopted by Otto's legitimate wife. The boy had been raised in the Voss family alongside Anders' father, which meant Anders' father had grown up with a half-brother he'd known nothing about. Or had he known? Had the family simply agreed never to speak of it? Anders grabbed his phone and called the only person who might have answers. His cousin Stellan, his father's sister's son, now in his 60s. Anders? Stellan sounded surprised. I heard you'd gone off the grid. I'm at Otto's old house. I found some things, Stellan. Things about the family. A pause. What kind of things? Did my father have a brother? A younger brother named Johann. The silence stretched so long, Anders thought the call had dropped. Stellan? We weren't supposed to talk about that. Stellan's voice had gone flat. But he existed. Yes, Uncle Johann existed. Anders felt a surge of something, vindication, excitement, dread. Tell me about him. There's not much to tell. He was there when I was growing up, but he was separate somehow, like he was part of the family, but not really part of it. The adults treated him differently, politely, but with distance. I remember asking my mother once why Uncle Johann seemed sad all the time, and she told me never to bring it up again. Did anyone ever explain where he came from? Not really. There were whispers, things I overheard when the adults thought we kids weren't listening. Something about a scandal. About Otto and another woman. But your grandmother Helene took the boy in, raised him as her own. I always thought that was decent of her, considering. Considering what? Considering the boy was proof of her husband's betrayal. Anders absorbed this. Helene abandoned by her husband, raising the child of his affair. The courage or cruelty of it. He couldn't decide which it was. Where is Johann now? I don't know. After your father died, that would have been 15 years ago, Johann came to the funeral. Stayed at the back, didn't talk to anyone. I tried to approach him after, but he left before I could. Haven't seen or heard from him since. You don't have an address. A phone number? No. He cut ties with the family years before that. I think... Stellan hesitated. I think the family hurt him, Anders. Not with violence, but with silence. With treating him like a secret to be managed, instead of a person to be loved. Can you blame him for leaving? After the call ended, Anders sat with this new information. Johann Voss, 64 years old, alive somewhere, carrying the weight of a childhood spent as a family's shameful secret. Anders had to find him, had to give him the letters, show him proof that his mother loved Otto, that he'd been wanted, that the affair wasn't just scandal, but genuine love. He spent the next 2 days searching online. Johann Voss wasn't a common name, but it wasn't unique either. He found several men with that name in the right age range, but none in the local area. Then on the 3rd day he found a property record. Johann Voss, owner of a small house 3 hours away in a town called Riverside. The age matched. The timing of purchase matched. The house had been bought 30 years ago, around when Johann would have been establishing himself as an adult. Anders stared at the address on his screen. He could drive there. Show up at this man's door with a box full of his mother's letters and demand answers. But what right did he have? Johann had escaped the family once. Maybe he didn't want to be found. While Anders wrestled with this decision, his phone rang. Kieran. Anders answered, bracing himself. "Hey, son?" "Dad." Kieran's voice was cautious, uncertain. "Freya said you called her. Said you're at Great-Grandpa Otto's place." "I am. And you answered her call. You're talking to people now." The hurt in Kieran's voice was unmistakable. Anders closed his eyes. "I know I haven't been a good father. Not since your mom died." "No, you haven't." The words were quiet but firm. "I'm sorry, Kieran. I'm sorry for disappearing, for making you and your sister feel like you didn't matter." Did we matter? Do we? More than anything. Anders' throat tightened. I couldn't figure out how to be your father when I couldn't even figure out how to keep living. And that's not an excuse. That's just the truth. Silence. "Then what are you doing out there?" "Freya said you found something about the family." Anders looked at his timeline, at the photographs spread across the table. "I found out Otto had a secret. A woman he loved, a child he fathered. And I'm trying to understand what happened to them. Why? Because," Anders paused, searching for the right words, "because I think maybe understanding why he ran will help me understand why I did, and maybe help me figure out how to stop running." Another long pause. "I want to come see you." Anders' immediate instinct was to say no, to protect his solitude. But he thought of Sylvia's journal, her plea for him to live, to not disappear. He thought of Freya's text, "Love you, Dad," and how long it had been since he'd let himself be loved. "Okay," he said. "Yes, come." "Really? Really?" "I'd like that." They arranged it. Kieran would drive up in 2 days. He had some work to finish first, but then he'd come. After they hung up, Anders walked outside. Coda followed, and they walked the perimeter of the property together, the bamboo forest rustling around them. For 2 years, Anders had been convinced that isolation was healing, that distance from others would somehow ease the pain of loss. But maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe healing required connection, required letting people in, required the courage to be vulnerable and present even when it hurt. He thought about Johan, living alone somewhere, cut off from family by choice or necessity. Thought about Otto, fleeing into obscurity, dying alone in Nevada. Thought about himself, hiding in this house, trying to resurrect the dead through restoration and research. They were all running, all hiding, all carrying wounds that silence only made deeper. That night, Anders made a decision. He would write to Johan, not show up uninvited, but write a letter explaining who he was, what he'd found, and offering to share it if Johan wanted to know. He'd give Johan the choice, engage with this painful history or continue his separate piece. Anders pulled out paper and pen, an old-fashioned approach that felt right given the letters he'd discovered. He wrote carefully, explaining everything, finding the letters, learning about Astrid, discovering Johan's adoption, realizing they were family. "I don't know what you want from life," he wrote near the end. "I don't know if you want anything to do with the Voss family after how you were treated. But I think you deserve to know that your mother loved your father, and he loved her. That you were wanted and cherished, even if the world made that love impossible. If you'd like to see the letters, to visit the house where your mother lived, you're welcome. No obligations, no expectations. Just an offer from one person who's trying to understand his family to another who might be doing the same." He included his phone number and the house address, sealed the envelope, and drove to Pinewood to mail it the next morning. The letter would arrive in 2 days. Then the choice would be Johan's. Standing in the small post office, Anders felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate, fragile hope that Sylvia might somehow survive her cancer, but something steadier. Hope that broken things could be mended, that scattered families could reconnect, that running could stop and staying could begin. He drove back to the house and spent the afternoon working on repairs with renewed energy. Kieran was coming in 2 days. Maybe Johan would call. Maybe, piece by piece, the family Otto had fractured could start to heal. And maybe in helping them heal, Anders could heal too. Kieran arrived on a grey afternoon, his car loaded with supplies Anders hadn't asked for. Groceries, a new camp stove, a portable heater. He climbed out looking uncertain, like he wasn't sure what reception he'd get. Anders walked down the porch steps and pulled his son into a hug. Kieran stiffened for a moment, then wrapped his arms around his father and held on tight. "I'm sorry," Anders said into his son's shoulder. "For everything. For disappearing on you." "I know," Kieran said, voice thick. "Freya told me. But I needed to hear it myself." They spent the first hour unloading the car and giving Kieran a tour of the house. Anders showed him the restoration work, the timeline on the dining table, the letters and photographs. Kieran listened with growing fascination. "So we might have an uncle nobody told us about. Looks that way. That's insane. Why would the family hide that?" Anders considered. Shame, maybe, or protection. I don't know if keeping it secret helped Johan or hurt him. They worked together that afternoon, Anders teaching Kieran how to replace rotted window frames. The work was companionable, easy, their hands occupied while conversation flowed. Kieran talked about his job. He'd been working in marketing but felt directionless, unsure what he wanted from life. Anders listened without offering advice, just present in a way he hadn't been for years. As evening approached, they moved to the basement to sort through boxes Anders hadn't yet opened. Most contained old tools, mason jars, newspapers yellow with age. But in the back corner, behind a rusted lawnmower, Anders found a metal lockbox. It took 20 minutes and a crowbar to get it open. Inside were documents, property deeds, bank statements, legal papers. Anders spread them on the basement floor, and he and Kieran read through them by flashlight. The property deed made Anders freeze. "Look at this." The deed showed ownership transfer from Otto Voss to Astrid Bergman, dated 1963. 1 year after Otto left. "He gave her the house," Kieran said, reading over his shoulder. "Which means, after Lars died, Otto made sure Astrid had security. But if she owned the house, why did she leave?" They kept searching. Further down in the stack was another deed, dated 1966. Ownership transferred from Astrid Bergman to the Voss family estate. A notation in faded ink read, "Abandoned property, owner whereabouts unknown." "She left without settling her affairs," Anders said. "Just disappeared. But why?" Anders thought about the timing. 1966. What was happening then? What would make a woman abandon a house she owned? They went upstairs, and Anders pulled out his laptop, searching for historical context. The mid-60s were turbulent. Social upheaval, changing attitudes, but also fear and judgment for anyone outside conventional norms. "She was already marked by scandal," Anders said, thinking aloud. "A widow with a child everyone knew wasn't her husband's. Maybe she faced threats. Maybe the judgment became unbearable. So she ran, taking Johan with her. And then what? Why did Grandma Helene end up with him? That was the question. The adoption was in 1968, 2 years after Astrid left. What happened in those 2 years? They spent the evening theorizing, building possible scenarios. Maybe Astrid got sick. Maybe she couldn't provide for Johan alone. Maybe she made the impossible choice to give him to the Voss family, hoping Otto's wife would raise him better than she could in poverty and shame. Around midnight, Anders's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered, heart pounding. "Hello? Is this Anders Voss?" A man's voice, careful and measured. "It is. This is Johan Voss. I got your letter." Anders stood up so fast his chair scraped. Kieran looked up, eyes widening. "Johan, thank you for calling. I almost didn't. I've spent 40 years trying to forget that family." Johan's voice carried old hurt. "But your letter, you said you found my mother's letters." "I did. She wrote to Otto over several years. They're love letters, Johan. Evidence that you were wanted, that their relationship was real. Silence on the line. Then, my whole life I was told my mother was dead. That she'd abandoned me. That I should be grateful the Voss family took me in. I think the truth is more complicated than that. I'd like to see the letters. And the house. I remember," his voice caught. "I remember pieces." Her singing. "The forest. I need to see if my memories are real or if I invented them." They arranged for Johan to visit in 3 days. After Anders hung up, he turned to find Kieran staring at him. "He's coming here?" "He is." "Dad, what if this is too much for him? What if seeing this place just hurts him?" Anders sat down heavily. "Then we'll deal with that. But he deserves the truth. He deserves to know he wasn't unwanted. The next 2 days passed in a flurry of preparation. Anders and Kieran worked to make the house more presentable, cleaned the master bedroom where the letters had been hidden, organized the artifacts chronologically. Freya called and Anders told her what was happening. She wanted to come too, but Anders asked her to wait. Let Johan meet them first without overwhelming him. The night before Johan's arrival, father and son sat on the porch. Coda lay between them, and the bamboo forest whispered in the darkness. "You know what's strange?" Kieran said. "This whole mystery, it brought you back to us." Anders nodded. "I think I needed something outside my grief, something to focus on besides what I lost. Mom would have loved this. The detective work, the family history. She would have." Anders felt the familiar ache, but also something else. Gratitude for the years they'd had. "Your mother was right, you know. In her journal, she told me to live, not just exist. I haven't been doing that. Are you now?" Anders considered. "I'm trying. Having you here helps." Kieran was quiet for a moment. "I was angry at you for so long. For checking out, for making Freya and me feel like we weren't enough to keep you present. You were enough. You are enough. I just couldn't." Anders struggled for words. "I couldn't figure out how to be a father when I felt like half of me had been torn away. But that's my failure, not yours. I get it now, I think. Being here, seeing you work on something, seeing you care about something again. You just needed time. Maybe, or maybe I needed a reason. This house, this mystery, Johan, they gave me something to hold on to besides pain." They sat in comfortable silence. Above them, stars emerged through gaps in the bamboo canopy. Somewhere in the forest, an owl called. "What do you think happened to her?" Kieran asked. "To Astrid? I don't know. But I hope Johan has answers. Or at least I hope we can give him some peace about who his parents were and why things happened the way they did." The next morning dawned cold and bright. Anders woke early, too nervous to sleep. He made coffee, checked the house 3 times, rearranged the artifacts on the dining table. Kieran watched with amusement. "He's family, Dad, not a museum inspector. I know. I want him to feel welcome, to feel like this place is his too." At 10 o'clock a car came up the long driveway. Anders and Kieran stepped onto the porch as a man emerged, tall, weathered, with Otto's sharp features and Astrid's dark eyes. He stood by his car for a long moment, staring at the house. Anders walked down the steps slowly. "Johan?" The man nodded, eyes glistening. "I remember this place. I remember standing right here, watching her." His voice broke. "Watching my mother on this porch." "Come inside," Anders said gently. "Let me show you what we found." Johan followed them in, moving through the rooms like a man in a dream. He touched the walls, the door frames, the kitchen counter. In the master bedroom, he knelt and ran his fingers over the floorboards where the letters had been hidden. "She kept them safe," he whispered. "She kept them here." Anders brought out the letters, the photographs, the locket. Johan held each item with trembling hands, reading his mother's words, seeing his parents young and in love. When he opened the locket and saw Otto's picture alongside his own infant face, he wept. Anders and Kieran stood quietly, giving him space for grief and recognition. Finally, Johan looked up. "All my life I thought I was a mistake, a burden, that my existence ruined everything." "You were loved," Anders said firmly. "These letters prove it. You were wanted." Johan's face crumpled, and Anders knelt beside him, this uncle he'd never known, and held him while he cried for the mother he'd lost and the father he'd never really had, and the childhood stolen by secrets and shame. And in that moment, Anders understood that healing wasn't about fixing what was broken. It was about acknowledging the breaks, honoring the pain, and choosing to build something new from the pieces that remained. They spent hours at the dining table, Johan reading every letter while Anders and Kieran sat quietly, bearing witness to a man discovering his origins. When Johan finally set down the last letter, his face was transformed, still sad, but somehow lighter, as if a weight he'd carried his entire life had been named and could now be set aside. "Tell me about your life," Anders said. "Or what happened after Helene adopted you?" Johan leaned back, eyes distant. "I have memories from before, fragments really. living in this house with my mother. She sang all the time, even when she was sad. I remember a tall man who would visit and bring me wooden toys. He'd lift me onto his shoulders. He paused. That was Otto, wasn't it? Probably. He was a carpenter. Making toys would have been natural for him. I remember the day everything changed. I was maybe 4 or 5. A man came to the house, angry, shouting. My mother hid me in a closet. I heard glass breaking, heard her crying. After that, we left. We moved around a lot. Different rooms, different towns. My mother got thinner, sadder. She worked whatever job she could find, but we were always hungry, always scared. Johann's hands clenched on the table. The last time I saw her, I was 7. She brought me to a big house. I know now it was where Helene lived. She knelt down, held my face, told me she loved me, but couldn't take care of me anymore. She said I'd be safe here, that these people would give me what she couldn't, then she left. His voice dropped to a whisper. I waited for her to come back. Every day for months I watched the door, certain she'd return for me. But she never did. I'm sorry, Anders said, the words inadequate but sincere. Helene was kind isn't the right word. Dutiful, maybe. She fed me, clothed me, made sure I went to school. But she never loved me. How could she? I was proof of her husband's betrayal. Your father, my half-brother, he didn't know what to make of me. We were raised as brothers, but there was always distance. Always this unspoken understanding that I wasn't really part of the family. Kieran spoke up. That's terrible. You were just a kid. I was, but I understood even then. The other relatives treated me like I was something shameful. At family gatherings, I was introduced as Helene's adopted son, never just as family. When I was 18, I left. Changed my name for a while, tried to become someone else. Eventually took back Voss because it was legally mine, but I never felt like I belonged to that name. What about Otto? Anders asked. Did you ever see him? Johann shook his head. Helene said he died when I was young, somewhere out west. I don't know if that's true or if she just told me that. I never looked for him. Part of me was angry. If he loved my mother so much, why didn't he take care of us? Why did he leave us to suffer? Anders pulled out Otto's sealed letter, the one addressed to my son, that had been meant for Anders' father, but never sent. I found this in the attic. It's Otto's confession. Maybe it'll help you understand. Johann took the letter carefully, unfolded the aged paper, and began to read. Anders watched his face shift as he processed Otto's words. The anguish over loving 2 women, the impossible choice between 2 sons, the hope that leaving would protect everyone. He was a coward, Johann said when he finished, but there was less anger in his voice than resignation. He loved my mother, but not enough to fight for her. Not enough to acknowledge me publicly. Maybe, Anders said, or maybe he was just human, caught between duty and desire in a time when there were no good options. Johann looked at him. You defend him? Not defend. Understand. I spent my whole life judging Otto for leaving, for abandoning his family. But I did the same thing. When my wife died, I abandoned my children emotionally. I disappeared into grief and let them suffer alone. So who am I to judge what Otto did when I couldn't do any better? The honesty hung in the air. Kieran reached over and squeezed his father's shoulder. Johann studied Anders for a long moment. Your letter said you came here to heal. Are you healing? I'm trying. Finding these letters, learning your story, it's given me something to focus on, besides my pain. And it's brought my son back into my life. Maybe my daughter too. Freya, Kieran added. Our sister. She'd love to meet you. Johann looked uncertain. I don't know if I'm ready for more family. No pressure, Anders said quickly. You get to decide what kind of relationship you want with us, if any. But I want you to know you're welcome here. This house was your mother's. In a way, it's yours too. They spent the afternoon walking the property. Johann showed them where he remembered playing as a small child, a flat area near the bamboo forest where his mother had spread blankets for picnics. They found the remnants of an old fire pit, stones still arranged in a circle, though overgrown with weeds. She'd make soup in a pot over the fire, Johann said, kneeling by the stones. She'd tell me stories about when she was young, about her dreams. I didn't understand half of it, but I loved hearing her voice. In the late afternoon, they went to the workshop Anders and Kieran had discovered. Johan stopped in the doorway, staring at the tools, the unfinished cradle. "He was making this for me," he said, touching the cradle's smooth wood. "We think so." It was never finished. Johan ran his hand along the carved details, delicate work, obviously done with love. "What happens to it now?" "Kieran and I thought we might finish it. Complete what Otto started. But it's yours, Johan. Everything in this workshop, it's your father's legacy. You should decide what to do with it." Johan was quiet for a long time. "Then, could we finish it together, the three of us? I'd like to learn the craft. I'd like to create something instead of just being haunted by the past." They agreed. Over the next 2 days, Johan stayed at the house. Anders taught him basic carpentry, and together they worked on completing the cradle Otto had started 6 decades ago. The work was meditative, the 3 men falling into a rhythm of measuring, cutting, sanding, fitting pieces together. As they worked, Johan shared more stories. What he remembered of Astrid, the kindnesses she'd shown him despite their poverty, the songs she sang. Anders and Kieran shared memories too, of Sylvia, of the family life they'd had before cancer destroyed it, of learning to live with loss. "Do you think she's still alive?" Johan asked one evening. "My mother?" Anders had wondered the same thing. "I don't know. She'd be 87 now if she is. But she disappeared so completely. No death certificate, no records after 1965. It's like she became a ghost. Maybe that's what she wanted, to disappear to protect me from the scandal. Maybe letting Helene adopt me was her way of giving me a normal life. Do you want to search for her?" "We could try." Johan considered this. "I don't know. Part of me wants to find her, to ask why she left. But part of me is afraid. What if she's dead? What if she's alive and doesn't want to be found? What if knowing the truth is worse than living with mystery?" "Those are fair questions," Anders said. "What would you do? If you could find answers about Otto, about what happened to him after he left." Anders thought about this. "A month ago I would have said I didn't care. But now I think I'd want to know. Not to judge him, but to understand. To close the loop." Johan nodded slowly. "Then maybe we should try. Not just for my mother, but for all of us. To understand the whole story." They decided to expand their search. Kieran offered to handle the online research. Genealogy databases, social media, public records. Johan knew some details about the towns they'd lived in after leaving the house, places to start searching. Anders would visit county offices, talk to people who might remember. That night, after Johan had gone to sleep in the guest room, Anders and Kieran sat on the porch. "This is good what you're doing," Kieran said, "helping him find answers. It helps me too. Gives me purpose. More than that. You're different than you were, present, engaged." Anders nodded. "Your mother told me to live. I'm finally understanding what that means. It means showing up. It means letting people matter to you even though you know you'll lose them eventually. It means building connections instead of hiding from pain. She'd be proud of you." "I hope so." Anders pulled out his phone and looked at his contacts. "I'm going to call your sister. Ask her to come up here. Johan should meet her. And we should all be together for this. Really, really, it's time to stop running from family. Time to stop letting fear keep me isolated." He called Freya, and she answered on the second ring, voice hopeful. "Dad? Hey, sweetheart. How would you feel about coming up here for a few days? There's someone I'd like you to meet." The joy in her voice made his throat tight. "I'll leave tomorrow morning." After they hung up, Anders sat looking at the bamboo forest under moonlight. The house that had been a tomb for his grief was becoming something else, a place of connection, of family coming together, of secrets transformed into understanding. He wasn't healed. Grief didn't work that way. But he was healing, one day at a time, one connection at a time, one choice to stay present instead of disappearing. And for now, that was enough. Freya arrived the next morning with boxes of pastries and tears streaming down her face. Anders met her on the porch and held her while she cried, both of them releasing 2 years of accumulated grief and distance. "I missed you so much," she said against his shoulder. "I missed you too. I'm sorry it took me so long to find my way back." Inside, Anders introduced her to Johan. She studied him with open curiosity, seeing the family resemblance, the Voss bone structure, Otto's eyes. "You look like the photographs of great-grandpa," she said. "It's uncanny," Johann smiled slightly. "Genetics don't lie, even when families do." Over breakfast, they brought Freya up to speed on everything: the letters, the timeline, the mystery of Astrid's disappearance. She listened intently, asking questions, already thinking through research strategies. "I work with databases all day," she said. "Let me see what I can find." They set up a command center at the dining table. 3 laptops, printed records, maps marking the towns Johann remembered. Freya attacked the search with systematic precision, starting with the last known location where Johann remembered living with Astrid. "You said you were about 7 when she left you with Helene." "That was 1968, so before that, 1965 to 1968, you moved around. Do you remember town names?" Johann closed his eyes, thinking. "Millbrook. We stayed there for a while. And I remember a place called Fairhaven, near water." "Somewhere with a lot of churches," Freya typed rapidly. "Fairhaven. There are 3 towns with that name in the region. Let me check which has a waterfront." She pulled up maps, compared them. "This one? Small coastal town about 100 miles from here." "That looks right," Johann said, peering at the screen. "I remember boats." "Okay, so if we assume she was moving to escape attention, she probably used different names. But vital records, births, deaths, marriages, those would be filed in the counties where they occurred." Freya navigated to a county records database. "This is going to take time, but we can search death certificates for women in the right age range." While Freya worked online, Anders and Kieran drove to the county office to search physical archives. They spent hours going through old records, finding nothing. But when they returned that evening, Freya's expression stopped them in the doorway. "I found something," she said quietly. "But you're not going to believe it." They gathered around her laptop. On the screen was an adoption certificate, not Johann's adoption by Helene, but another one. A child named Johann Hoffmann, age 7, adopted by Helene Voss in 1968. "We already knew that," Kieran said. "Look at what else is filed with it." Freya clicked to another document. The adoption required termination of parental rights, which means there should be a record of who gave up those rights. The document listed Astrid Bergman Hoffmann as deceased, same as Johann had been told. But there was a notation, a case number referencing a probate file. "I searched that case number," Freya continued. "The probate file was for settling Astrid's affairs after her death. But here's what's strange. Her death certificate lists the date as June 1968, cause of death as pneumonia. But there's no burial record, no grave, no funeral home records." "What does that mean?" Johann asked, voice tight. "It might mean the death was falsified to enable the adoption." Or Freya pulled up another screen. "Or it means she died somewhere without proper documentation, and someone filed a delayed certificate later." Anders felt cold. "Can you trace where the death certificate was filed?" "Already did. It was filed in Fairhaven, the coastal town Johann remembered, by a doctor who practiced there in the 60s. "Is the doctor still alive?" "Died in 1995, but I found his practice records donated to the county medical archive." Freya looked up. "We could go there. See if there are patient records for Astrid." The next morning, all 4 of them drove to Fairhaven. The county medical archive was housed in a library basement, rows of filing cabinets containing decades of medical records. A volunteer archivist, an elderly man named Hugh, greeted them. "We're looking for records from a doctor who practiced here in the 60s, Freya explained. "Dr. Bernard Ashworth. Specifically, records for a patient named Astrid Hoffmann." Hugh led them to the relevant cabinets. "Doctor-patient confidentiality doesn't apply after death, and these records are old enough to be public. Help yourself, but please be careful with the papers." They searched for an hour before Johann pulled a thin folder. Here, the file for Astrid Bergman Hoffmann contained intake forms, notes from several visits in 1967 and early 1968. The handwriting was difficult to read, but the story that emerged was heartbreaking. Astrid had come to the clinic in advanced stages of tuberculosis. She'd been living in a boarding house, working as a seamstress. trying to support herself and Johan. The disease was aggressive. Dr. Ashworth's notes documented her decline: weight loss, persistent cough, fever. He'd recommended hospitalization, but she'd refused, citing no money and no one to care for her son. The final note, dated May 1968, was brief. Patient's condition critical. Contacted county services regarding child welfare. Patient agreed to allow adoption placement rather than have child enter foster system. Patient expired June 3, 1968. Body released to county for burial. Johan's hands shook, holding the file. She died trying to take care of me. County burial, Anders said. That means she's probably in a potter's field somewhere. Unmarked grave. Freya was already searching on her phone. Fairhaven County Cemetery has a potter's field section. I can call them, see if they have records. She stepped outside to make the call. The three men sat in silence, processing. Johan's mother hadn't abandoned him. She died, alone and sick, making sure he'd be cared for before the end. Freya came back inside, her face pale. They have records. Astrid Hoffman, buried June 1968, Section C, Plot 127. It's unmarked, but they can show us the location. They drove to the cemetery in heavy silence. The caretaker, a woman named Mrs. Oakes, met them with a plot map. She led them to a section of the cemetery where grass grew over flat ground, with no headstones, just small metal markers with numbers. Here, she said gently, pointing to Plot 127. I'm sorry there's no marker. A lot of the indigent burials from that era have none. Johan knelt in the grass. His shoulders shook. Anders knelt beside him, and then Kieran and Freya joined them, the four of them creating a circle of family around a grave that had been forgotten for decades. She didn't leave me, Johan said through tears. She was dying and she made sure I'd be safe. She loved you, Freya said softly. Everything she did was to protect you. They stayed for a long time. Eventually Johan stood, wiping his eyes. She deserves a headstone, something that says she mattered, that she was loved. We'll take care of it, Anders promised. We'll make sure she's remembered properly. On the drive back, Johan was quiet, staring out the window. Finally he spoke. I spent 50 years angry at her for abandoning me. 50 years believing I wasn't worth staying for. And now? Anders asked. Now I know the truth. She stayed as long as she could. She gave me up only when she had no other choice. He turned to look at Anders. Thank you for finding this, for helping me understand. Your family, Anders said simply. This is what family does. That evening, back at the house, they held an impromptu memorial. They lit candles, shared what they knew of Astrid from the letters and Johan's memories, and toasted to a woman who'd loved impossibly and paid for it with everything. To Astrid, Anders said, raising his glass. May she finally rest in peace, knowing her son knows the truth. To my mother, Johan added, voice breaking, who loved me enough to let me go. Later, Anders stood alone on the porch. The bamboo forest swayed in the darkness, and he thought about all the ways love manifests, in staying, in leaving, in letting go when holding on would cause more harm. Astrid had let Johan go. Sylvia had begged Anders to live. Otto had fled to protect people he loved. All of them making impossible choices, doing the best they could with limited options. Anders pulled out his phone and texted Freya and Kieran, even though they were just inside, I love you both. Thank you for not giving up on me. The responses came quickly. Freya, love you too, Dad, always. Kieran, we're family. That's what we do. Family. The word meant something different now than it had a month ago. Family was messy and complicated and full of secrets, but it was also connection and support and showing up even when it was hard. Anders was learning to be family again. Learning to stay instead of run. Learning to live instead of just exist. And tomorrow, they'd start planning a proper memorial for Astrid, a headstone with her name, her dates, and an inscription that honored the love she'd shared with Otto and the son she'd protected until her last breath. The healing wasn't finished, but it had begun. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost like family life. Freya had extended her remote work arrangement, setting up a laptop station in what used to be the parlor. Kieran had taken a leave from his job, claiming he needed time to help with a family project. Johan had nowhere else to be and no reason to leave. And Anders was present in a way he hadn't been since before Sylvia's diagnosis. He woke each morning with purpose, spent his days working alongside his children and his uncle, fell asleep, tired but content. They worked on the house together, transforming it room by room. But more importantly, they worked on finishing what Otto had started in the workshop. The cradle took shape under their combined efforts, each of them contributing skills. Anders guided the technical work, Johan brought a mechanic's precision, Kieran added creative touches, and Freya documented everything with photographs and notes. "We should write this down," she said one afternoon, watching them sand the cradle's rockers. The whole story, Otto and Astrid, Johan's life, finding each other. Other families probably have hidden histories too. Maybe we could help them understand how to search. You mean like a guide? Kieran asked. Or a memoir, something that shows how secrets hurt families, but truth can heal them. Johan looked up from his work. You'd want to tell my story? Put it out there for everyone to know? Only if you're comfortable with it, Freya said quickly. But I think there's power in breaking silence. How many other people are living with shame over things that weren't their fault? How many families are fractured by secrets that should have been addressed generations ago? Johan considered this. I spent my whole life hiding who I was, where I came from. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. Anders watched this exchange, proud of his daughter's insight and grateful for Johan's courage. We could wait until after the memorial. Give ourselves time to process everything first. They'd been planning Astrid's headstone, working with a monument company to design something appropriate. Anders had insisted on paying for it, but Johan had contributed too, wanting to be part of honoring his mother. The inscription they'd chosen was simple but meaningful. Astrid Bergman Hoffman, 1938-1968, beloved mother. Her love endures. The memorial service was scheduled for the following week. They'd invited the few remaining family members, cousin Stellan and his children, some distant relatives who'd known Helene. Anders had even reached out to Ingrid from the village archives and Gustav Lindgren, the elderly man who'd known Otto and Astrid. Do you think people will come? Johan asked nervously. Some will, Anders said, and those who do will hear the truth. No more secrets, no more shame. As the day of the memorial approached, Anders found himself thinking more about Otto. They'd learned what happened to Astrid, but Otto's end remained murky. Family law said he died alone in Nevada in the 70s, but there were no records, no grave, nothing to verify it. One evening, Anders brought this up with Johan. Did Helene ever tell you anything specific about Otto's death? Just that he died out west? She didn't seem to know much, or maybe she didn't want to share. Why, I'm wondering if we should try to find out. Close that loop too. Johan nodded slowly. I've been thinking the same thing. He's my father. I never knew him, but now that I know the truth about him and my mother, I'd like to know where he ended up. What happened to him? Freya overheard and joined them. I can search death records in Nevada. Do we have any idea what year? Sometime in the 70s, supposedly. Could be anywhere in that decade. That's a lot of records, but I can narrow it by age range and the name Voss. She opened her laptop, already typing. Let me see what I can find. While Freya searched, the men returned to the workshop. They were nearly finished with the cradle, just final sanding and the application of protective finish remaining. Otto's unfinished work would finally be complete. What will we do with it when it's done? Kieran asked. Johan ran his hand over the smooth wood. I think it should stay here, in this house, as a reminder of what was started and what was finished, of love that endured even when circumstances tried to destroy it. I like that, Anders said. The house was Otto and Astrid's place, even if they couldn't be here together. Now it can be a place where family gathers, where the past is honored instead of hidden. They worked in companionable silence, the rhythm of sanding meditative. Anders watched his son and his uncle work side by side and felt a surge of gratitude. A month ago, he'd been alone, drowning in grief. Now he was surrounded by family, connected and present. Later that night, Freya came to find them, her expression strange, not sad exactly, but thoughtful. "I found something." "About Otto?" They gathered around her laptop. She'd pulled up a death certificate from Reno, Nevada, dated 1979. Otto Voss, age 67, cause of death listed as heart failure. "There's more," Freya said. "I found an obituary." She clicked to a scanned newspaper page. The obituary was brief. Otto Voss, age 67, passed away at Mercy Hospital. He is survived by a son in California. Services private. "A son in California," Johan read. "That would be your father, Anders. So Otto died knowing he'd left a son behind, but apparently never reaching out. Or maybe he did and was rejected," Kieran suggested. "Grandpa wasn't exactly forgiving from what I've heard." Anders thought about his father, stern, uncompromising, carrying resentment about Otto's abandonment his entire life. "I don't think my father would have accepted contact from Otto. The wound was too deep. But here's what's interesting," Freya said, clicking to another document. "I found a Nevada probate record. Otto left an estate, small but not nothing. And guess who the executor was?" She turned the screen so they could see. "Someone named Margaret Voss." "Who's that?" Kieran asked. "I don't know. But she filed the probate paperwork, which suggests she was close to him when he died." Freya pulled up more searches. "I'm trying to find records of Margaret Voss in Nevada around that time, but nothing's coming up yet." "Could be a second wife," Johan suggested. "Maybe Otto remarried after leaving." The thought settled over them. Otto, building a second life in Nevada, perhaps even a second family. It made sense. A man running from shame and impossible circumstances might try to start fresh. "If he did remarry," Anders said slowly, "then Johan isn't the only hidden family. There could be others out there who don't know about us either." The implications were staggering. Their family tree might have branches they'd never imagined. "Should we keep searching?" Freya asked. "Try to find Margaret Voss and see if she's still alive or if there are children." Anders looked at Johan. "What do you think?" "It's your father we're talking about." Johan was quiet for a long moment. I think I'd like to know. I've spent my whole life not knowing where I came from, who I was connected to. If there are other people out there who shared Otto as a father or a grandfather, maybe they deserve to know the truth too. Maybe they have their own questions that need answers. Then we keep searching," Anders decided. "After the memorial, we'll honor Astrid first. Then we'll see what else we can find about Otto's later life." They spent the next few days in final preparations. The headstone was ready, being installed at the cemetery. Stellan had confirmed he'd come to the memorial with his family. Gustav Lindgren was too frail to travel, but Ingrid Sorensen promised to attend. The night before the memorial, they completed the cradle. Anders applied the final coat of finish while the others watched. The wood glowed in the lamplight, every curve and detail speaking of care and craftsmanship. "Your father made this with love," Anders told Johan, "and now we've finished it with love. Whatever else happened, whatever mistakes were made, this stands as proof that love existed, that it mattered." Johan touched the cradle gently, his eyes wet. "Thank you, all of you, for giving me this, for giving me my history." That night, Anders couldn't sleep. He walked through the house, room by room, seeing it transformed. What had been abandoned and decaying was now alive again, full of light and purpose. The house had given him a mystery to solve, but in solving it, he'd found something more valuable, connection to his children, to Johan, to the complicated truth of his family's past. He stood in the master bedroom, where the letters had been hidden, and thought about all the lives that had intersected here. Otto and Astrid loving impossibly. Helene carrying betrayal and still choosing to raise another woman's child. Johan stolen from his mother by death, living a half-life of shame and secrets. And now Anders, his children, all of them working to transform secrets into truth, shame into understanding, isolation into family. Tomorrow they would gather at Astrid's grave and finally give her the acknowledgement she deserved. They would stand as family and proclaim that love mattered, that she mattered, that the choices people made in desperate circumstances didn't erase their worth. Anders returned to his room and picked up Sylvia's journal one last time. He wrote in the margin of the last page, "I'm living, Sylvia. I'm really living. Thank you for loving me enough to make me promise. Thank you for knowing I'd need that promise when I couldn't imagine needing anything again." He closed the journal and set it on the shelf beside Otto's tools. The past and present integrated at last. Tomorrow would mark another step forward, honoring what was lost while building what could still be, and Anders was ready. The morning of the memorial dawned clear and cool, autumn settling into the forest. Anders woke before sunrise, too restless to sleep. He found Johan already awake, sitting on the porch with coffee, staring into the bamboo. "Nervous?" Anders asked, joining him. "Terrified. I'm about to stand in front of people and claim a mother I barely remember, acknowledge a father I never knew. What if I say the wrong thing? What if no one comes? Then it'll be the 5 of us, and that's enough." But when they arrived at the cemetery that afternoon, there were more than 5. Stellan had brought his family, 3 adult children and their spouses. Ingrid Sorensen was there, leaning on a cane. A handful of elderly villagers Anders didn't recognize stood respectfully at a distance. Even the cemetery caretaker, Mrs. Oakes, had stayed to pay respects. The new headstone gleamed in the autumn sun, simple granite with clean lettering. Astrid's name, her dates, the words they'd chosen to remember her by. Anders stood with Freya on one side and Kieran on the other. Johan stood slightly apart, hands clenched at his sides. Anders reached over and gently took his uncle's arm, pulling him into their circle. "Family. Thank you all for coming," Anders began, his voice carrying across the small gathering. "We're here to remember Astrid Bergman Hoffman, a woman who was forgotten too soon and deserves to be remembered properly." He told the story simply, how Astrid and Otto had loved each other in a time and place that made that love impossible, how she'd borne a son and raised him alone through poverty and illness, how she'd made the final sacrifice of letting him go to ensure his safety. "She died without acknowledgement," Anders continued, "without anyone to mourn her publicly. Today we correct that. Today we say her name and proclaim that her life mattered, that her love mattered, that she mattered." Johan stepped forward, his voice shaking. "I'm her son. I was 7 when she died. For most of my life I believed she'd abandoned me, that I wasn't worth staying for. But the truth is, she loved me so much that even while dying, her only concern was making sure I'd be cared for. She gave me up not because I didn't matter, but because I mattered more than anything." He knelt and placed a hand on the headstone. "Mama, I'm sorry it took me so long to find you. I'm sorry you died alone. But I want you to know I turned out okay. I found family, and they helped me understand that you never stopped loving me." Tears ran down his face. Freya knelt beside him, then Kieran, then Anders. The 4 of them together, honoring a woman whose love had survived death and time and the weight of family secrets. Ingrid stepped forward, surprising everyone. "I knew Astrid when she was young. She had the most beautiful voice, sang in the village choir. She was kind, gentle. When the scandal happened, people were cruel. They forgot she was human, that love doesn't always follow the rules we set for it." She looked at Johan. "Your mother was a good woman, caught in impossible circumstances. Don't let anyone tell you different." One by one, the elderly villagers came forward with small memories. Astrid helping at a church bazaar. Astrid lending a hand when someone needed it. Astrid's grace, despite judgment. Each memory was a gift, returning dimension to a woman who'd been reduced to scandal. When the last person had spoken, they stood in silence around the grave. Anders thought about all the ways love manifests, all the sacrifices people make, all the wounds carried across generations, but also about healing, about truth-telling, about family choosing to gather instead of scatter. "Otto loved you too," Johan said softly to the headstone. "I found his letters. He never stopped loving you, and I wish I'd known you longer. I wish you could see who I became, but I'll make sure you're remembered. I'll make sure your love story isn't forgotten." They left flowers, simple wildflowers Freya had gathered from the forest around the house. As they walked back to their cars, Stellan caught up with Anders. "That was brave, what you all did, speaking the truth after so many years of silence." "It was necessary," Anders said. "The silence hurt everyone. Truth is better, even when it's painful. I'm sorry we weren't better to Johan growing up. I was just a kid, but still. We should have questioned why he was treated differently. You're here now. That matters." Stellan nodded. "Stay in touch. I'd like to know how this story ends." "It's not ending," Anders said, looking at his children and Johan. "It's just beginning." Back at the house that evening, they were quiet, emotionally exhausted. They heated leftover soup and sat around the dining table, the timeline and artifacts still spread before them. "What happens now?" Kieran asked. "We keep looking," Freya said. "We find out what happened to Otto in Nevada. We track down Margaret Voss. We fill in the remaining gaps." "And then?" Johan asked. Anders considered. "Then we decide what to do with this place, this house that holds so much history. We could sell it, walk away, or we keep it," Johan finished. "Make it a gathering place, somewhere family can come together instead of falling apart." "I like that idea," Freya said. "We could fix it up properly, make it comfortable, use it for holidays, reunions. A place where secrets are told instead of kept," Kieran added. Anders looked around the table at these people. His children, his uncle, his family pieced together from fragments and loss. A month ago, he'd come here planning to disappear. Now he was planning a future. "Then that's what we'll do," he said. "We'll finish the restoration. We'll make this a home again, and we'll use it to keep family connected instead of scattered." They raised their glasses in agreement. Outside, the bamboo forest swayed in the evening breeze, and somewhere in the house, old wood settled with a contented creak. The past had been honored. Now they could build the future. The week after the memorial, Freya intensified her search for Margaret Voss. She cross-referenced Nevada records, obituaries, marriage licenses, property deeds. It took 3 days of methodical searching before she found a lead. "I've got something," she announced, calling everyone to her laptop. Margaret Voss married to Otto Voss in 1965 in Reno, Nevada. She died in 2003, so Otto did remarry, Johan said quietly. "There's more. They had a daughter. Born in 1967, Freya pulled up a birth certificate. Her name was Sarah Voss, and she's still alive. I found her on social media." The room went silent. Anders stared at the screen showing a woman in her late 50s, smiling in a profile photo. His half-aunt, Johan's half-sister. Another branch of the family tree completely unknown. "Should we contact her?" Kieran asked. "I think we have to," Johan said. "She deserves to know about Otto's first family, just like I deserve to know the truth." Anders agreed. "But carefully. This will be a shock." Freya composed a message through the social media platform, explaining who they were and what they'd discovered. She kept it brief, respectful, offering to share information if Sarah was interested. Then she sent it and they waited. The response came 2 days later. Sarah Voss Bennett, she'd married, wrote back cautiously. She knew her father had been married before and had left a son in California, but he'd never spoken about the circumstances. She'd assumed it was a straightforward divorce, nothing more. They arranged a video call. When Sarah's face appeared on screen, the family resemblance was unmistakable. Otto's eyes, his sharp features softened by feminine grace. "This is surreal," Sarah said, looking at Johan through the camera. "I have a brother. A whole family I never knew about." Johan smiled gently. "Half-brother. And it's just as surreal for me. I grew up thinking I was alone." They spent 2 hours talking. Sarah shared what she knew. Otto had been a quiet man, skilled with his hands, who'd worked as a Finnish carpenter in Reno. He'd been kind to her but distant, as if part of him lived somewhere else. He'd never spoken about his past, and Margaret had respected his silence. "Did he seem happy?" Johan asked. Sarah considered. "Content maybe, but not happy. There was always sadness in him, like he'd lost something he couldn't get back." "He lost my mother," Johan said, "and me, and the life he couldn't have. He talked once, near the end, Sarah continued. He was in the hospital, dying. He told my mother he'd made mistakes, that he'd left people behind who deserved better. He made her promise to try to contact his son, your father Anders, after he died. But she tried and was turned away. Anders remembered his father's bitterness, his refusal to even speak Otto's name. My father wouldn't have accepted contact. He was too hurt. Otto knew that, I think. My mother said he died with regrets, but also with acceptance. He'd made his choices and lived with them. Sarah paused. I wish I'd known about all of you. About the full story. We're telling you now, Freya said gently. If you want to know. They shared everything. The letters, the photographs, Astrid's story, Johann's journey to understanding. Sarah listened with tears streaming down her face. My father was more complicated than I knew, she said finally. He wasn't just a man who left one family. He was a man caught between impossible choices. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. It makes it human, Johann said. He loved my mother but couldn't have her. He tried to protect everyone and ended up hurting everyone instead. But he loved. That counts for something. Sarah agreed to visit. She wanted to see the house, meet everyone in person, stand where her father had stood all those years ago. When the call ended, Anders felt both drained and complete. The mystery was solved. Otto had fled to Nevada, remarried, started over. He'd lived a quiet life, carried his regrets, died with unresolved wounds. But he'd also been remembered by a daughter who loved him, even if she hadn't known his whole story. We should put together a family tree, Freya suggested. A real one with everyone included. All the branches, all the secrets revealed. Over the next few days, they worked on it together, a large chart showing Otto's marriages, his children, the connections spreading out through generations. No more hidden branches, no more forgotten family members. When Sarah arrived a week later, they showed her everything. She walked through the house with wonder, touching the same walls Otto had built, standing in the workshop where he'd created furniture and toys. She held the letters between Otto and Astrid, reading them with tears. He really loved her, Sarah said. My mother was good to him, but this was different. This was the love of his life. Johann showed her the completed cradle. He started this for me. We finished it together, your family and mine. Sarah ran her hand over the smooth wood. It's beautiful. He would have been glad to know you finished it. That evening, they gathered on the porch, Anders, Freya, Kieran, Johann, and Sarah. 5 people connected by one man's complicated life, by love and loss and the secrets that families keep. What do we do now? Sarah asked. Now that we know everything? We stay connected, Anders said. We don't let another generation grow up not knowing their family. We break the cycle of secrets and silence. They agreed. They would stay in touch, visit regularly, make sure the next generation knew the full story, the mistakes and the love, the running and the staying, the pain and the healing. As night fell over the bamboo forest, Anders felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just hope, but peace. The story was complete. The family was whole, or as whole as it could be after so much loss. And that was enough. 6 months had passed since Anders first arrived at the forest house, alone and drowning in grief. Now, as he stood on the porch watching cars pull up the driveway, he barely recognized the man he'd been. The house was ready, fully restored, windows gleaming, fresh paint on the siding, the porch solid under his feet. But more than that, it was alive. Today marked the first official family gathering, a reunion, bringing together all the scattered branches of the Voss family. Stellan arrived first with his children and grandchildren, then Sarah with her husband and 2 adult sons. Freya had driven up yesterday with her partner, the relationship growing serious. Kieran had moved to a town nearby, visiting several times a week to help with the final restoration work. And Johann had sold his house in Riverside and built a small cottage on the property just beyond the bamboo forest. He and Anders ran a custom woodworking business together now, creating furniture pieces that honored traditional craftsmanship. The workshop Otto had abandoned was full of life again, sawdust and creativity and the satisfaction of building beautiful things. Anders walked through the house, checking last-minute details. In the master bedroom, the cradle sat in the corner, a monument to love and completion. On the walls hung photographs: Otto and Astrid, Helene and Otto, Johann as a child, Sarah with her father. No more hidden faces. Everyone acknowledged, everyone remembered. The dining room table had been extended to accommodate everyone. Freya had suggested they cook from Astrid's recipe book, recipes Johann barely remembered, but that tasted like childhood when he tried them. The kitchen smelled of roasting meat and herbs, of bread baking, of family gathering. "You did it," a voice said behind him. Anders turned to find Johann in the doorway. His uncle looked different now, lighter, the perpetual sadness that had shadowed him replaced by something that looked like belonging. "We did it," Anders corrected. "All of us together. Your wife would be proud. You kept your promise to her." Anders thought of Sylvia, of her journal's final plea. "I hope so. I'm living again, really living, not just going through motions." People began arriving in earnest. Children ran through the house, exploring rooms and climbing the bamboo grove under careful supervision. Adults gathered in clusters, sharing stories, filling in family history. There was laughter, tears, the comfortable chaos of family reconnecting. During dinner, Anders stood to speak. The room quieted, all eyes on him. "Thank you for coming. 6 months ago, I came to this house planning to hide from the world. I'd lost my wife, pushed away my children, given up on life having any meaning. But this house had other plans." He gestured to the walls around them. "It held secrets, love letters, hidden histories, evidence of a complicated past. In uncovering those secrets, I found more than I expected. I found family I didn't know existed. I found purpose. And I found my way back to the children I'd abandoned in my grief." He looked at Freya and Kieran, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry it took me so long. I'm sorry you had to watch me disappear. But I'm here now. I'm staying. And I promise to be the father you deserve." Freya wiped her eyes. Kieran nodded, acceptance clear on his face. Anders continued. "This house represents something important. Otto and Astrid loved each other but couldn't be together. That love created Johann, and through Johann we found Sarah, and through all of this we found each other. Secrets fractured this family for generations. Today we choose truth. We choose connection. We choose to stay." He raised his glass. "To Otto and Astrid, who loved impossibly. To Helene, who showed grace we're still trying to understand. To my wife, Sylvia, who taught me that living means showing up even when it hurts. And to all of us, may we never let silence divide us again." To family, everyone echoed, glasses raised. After dinner, as evening settled over the forest, Anders found himself alone on the porch. Coda lay at his feet, grey now around the muzzle, but still faithful. The bamboo swayed in the breeze, making that sound like rain that had comforted Anders through his darkest nights. Johann joined him, settling into the chair beside him. "I've been thinking about forgiveness," Johann said. "For years I was angry at my mother for leaving me, at Otto for not claiming me, at the family for treating me like a secret. But anger is exhausting, and now that I know the truth, I understand they all did the best they could with impossible situations. Forgiveness is hard," Anders agreed, "but necessary. I forgive them. I forgive myself for all the years I spent bitter and isolated. And I'm grateful for you, for your children, for Sarah, for this second chance at family." Anders reached over and squeezed his uncle's shoulder. "I'm grateful too. You gave me a reason to keep going when I'd lost all reasons. You and your story, it saved my life." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set through the bamboo. Inside, the house glowed with light and voices, with life and laughter and the messy, beautiful reality of family. Anders thought about the journey, from grief to curiosity to understanding to healing. The path hadn't been straight and the healing wasn't complete. He still missed Sylvia, with an ache that would never fully disappear. But the ache was bearable now, contained within a life that had meaning again. His phone buzzed. A text from Freya. "Come inside, Dad. Sarah's about to tell stories about Otto." Anders stood, Johann beside him. Together, they walked into the house, into the warmth and noise and connection, into family, into life. The forest house that had been a tomb for secrets was now a home for truth. And Anders Voss, who'd come here to disappear, had found his way back to everything that mattered. He was home.